Hello, everybody. I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films and reflect on our lives. Hello, everybody. And we forget to mute the computer that we're using to monitor the stream, so we are interrupting ourselves. A couple of things. Thanks, Jeremy and Sean, for coming out to the show last night. It was a hoot. We showed film. It was called Free Range Kids, and it was kids going nuts, being basically unsupervised. It was like a 70s, more civilized, in a city, Lord of the Flies. Especially the last film, I Dare You, which was really nuts. And what was great is people brought their kids, and so we got to talk with kids about like what they were watching and like what do they think, and would this be shown nowadays and stuff like that. So it was really a lot of fun. So thank you guys for that. All right, so behind me I got a film scanner, and we have a 16mm film set up, and this is a film that I just got like 2 days ago, and I love being able to like get a film, check it in, catalog it, put it on the scanner, and let's watch it. Let's see what it is. So this is TV News, Measure of the Medium, I believe. Enjoy.
I'm a great believer in news on TV. I think a person stays informed by listening.
Read the newspaper and he should watch the TV.
Those are authentic things that happen, so I have to believe it.
I'm not sure I even believe the things I hear from other people.
Seeing is believing and also hearing.
What you see on the television and what you read on the newspaper are not the real pictures.
And I listen to the radio all day long.
I can't believe that you can really hear one broadcast or read one paper and be satisfied.
I'm happy to say that I remain informed by listening.
Well, I talk to people all day long, get their different viewpoints.
That's very good if you talk to the right people.
Television presents an opinionated viewpoint.
I think TV news is important.
TV news is important.
I think it's great.
Television is the prime source of news and information for most Americans.
I read the newspaper.
Are these people well informed?
Their ideas.
Can you trust TV news? To help us learn to judge, to evaluate local television reporting, 4 members of the working press have agreed to tell us their problems, to share their view from the newsroom.
There's continual pressure. You're always operating with a deadline, and many decisions have to be made. Which stories are important and must be included in the upcoming newscast? In what order will they appear? How much time will each story get? It has to be written. Do we have visuals to use? Just getting the program on and off the air on time involves the skill and the effort of many people. A lot of elements must be assembled. For example, we use as many sources of news as possible. Press Association services, teletype machines that bring us information about the state, the nation, the world. Telephone contacts with law enforcement agencies, the courts, government officials, hospitals. The wire photo machine with its still pictures. Videotape material from our network affiliation. Our staff reporters who go out to get stories, and of course, our camera crews and the film processing lab. The film and slide projection department, as well as the art department. They prepare still pictures, graphs, charts, titles, promotional cards.
Got certain evidence.
If the street reporter returned with news film after processing, it has to be screened, looked at, then edited. That is, cut to tell the story and do it in the amount of time allotted to it in the newscast. This is a very responsible job, often extremely difficult. No matter what is cut out or left in some way, it must affect the telling of the story. Demonstrations, walkouts, sit-ins. often the real thing. But on occasion, people do try to use us, the television news medium. If a group is looking for attention, exposure for their ideas, they might call a TV station, tell us when and where a newsworthy event will be taking place. If it appears legitimate, of course we'll respond. Sometimes we find people waiting for the camera crew to arrive before they go into their act. But when we do find ourselves at an event staged and planned for television, a responsible newsman will either decline to cover the story or report it, explain what's happening, put the action in its proper perspective. It's a complicated business, and often time doesn't permit as many details as we'd like and as are available.
Time, a clock, a control over the number of stories, over their length. By an actual word count, a news broadcast represents about 2/3 of the front page of an average daily newspaper. Now, this TV newscast, therefore, is very much like that front page. You have a headline, you have some facts, but no additional pages to turn to for the full story. Its uniqueness is visual impact. We actually see and hear the event, see and hear the individual make his statement.
The inept leadership, first of the Board of Education, second because of the union.
If the story is controversial, it's important that we get spokesmen for both sides, for balance, for fairness, and for understanding of the issues. But if I can find a representative for only one side, the story still has to be covered. If we sum up the views, describe the charges of the opposing group, or if our anchorman takes my information and reads it, it will appear as if one side of the question isn't getting an equal opportunity. And it's easy to see why. The person in an interview is an advocate. He's selling his ideas, while we are reporters. Any person who's had contact with the news media in covering an event will probably question that event once they see it on television. Now, one of the things to be understood is the barriers that face any newsman. The biggest of these is time. I may not have enough time to interview all of the people involved in a story, or they may not be available. Anyway, I've got to get the news on film and then get that film back to my station in time for our newscast. And the camera itself can be misleading. Unlike the human eye, it's highly selective in what it records. The choice of a particular camera angle, or what is included in a shot, and what is not shown, all of this will have an effect on the understanding of the event. We're more impressed by what we see than what we hear. So if the newsman explains something to you, identifies what's going on, but your eye tells you something else, that's what stays with you. That's what we remember.
Well, I think that the logical lead for what came out of the governor's office is him signing into law that wide trailer bill. Let's follow that with the, I guess, the federal grand jury investigation of that principal.
Every reporter knows that the meaning or the implication of a story can be changed or affected by its placement within the newscast. So the order of the news stories is really very important. For example, if we report the city employees are out on strike for higher wages, and then immediately follow this with a story of description of last night's $100,000 wedding of the mayor's daughter, which was held in the huge mansion provided by the city, well, we really are editorializing. But if we separated these two stories, then each would stand individually and be judged on its own merit. Television uses very sophisticated equipment that sometimes presents mechanical or electrical problems. And so information doesn't get on the air as we had planned that it would. And we end up with an unbalanced news story. And then a viewer may accuse the news team of deliberate attempt at distortion. While the Press Association news services are usually very accurate, sometimes they too make mistakes. And we couldn't begin to check out or verify everything that they send to us. Now, the charge of managing or distorting the news can result from many things, aside from the personal human factor involving the newscaster. For example, misinformation can be given by someone who's being interviewed. And we all bring to watching the news our own set of prejudices or ideas. Often viewers hear the news differently. The same story but we hear it differently. Now, on the personal level, I don't believe that complete, total objectivity is humanly possible. But that's the goal of the professional reporter. And a really good reporter comes very close to that goal.
Well, Mayor Bates has demanded an apology.
Well, I don't know what he said, and I'm sure he doesn't know what I said in Washington.
If a charge, an allegation, is made against an organization or an individual, we feel the responsibility of getting an answer from the accused. But more than that, we try to get it on the same newscast. Now, that isn't always possible, but we try. There are some news directors, I suppose, who do not just report the news, news directors who are concerned with the effect of a story on their community, the social or economic or political, perhaps even the moral effect of the story. So they might decide to kill a story or not run it or soft pedal it. Now, when that happens, a station and its news department are saying to their community, in our judgment, you are not mature enough, you're not educated enough or aware enough to handle this information. And in this free society, that does happen. And TV is a visual medium. We attempt to use as many pictures, as many on-the-scene reports as we possibly can. But of course, this can be a trap, too, because there's a natural desire to use film footage if it is outstanding, even though the story may be a minor one. It may attract more viewers, and after all, competition between stations is keen. But using that exciting film may mean less available time for a really important story. If too many fast-breaking important stories all occur at the same time, you're faced with the decision which one gets the camera crew, which one gets the reporter, and which one gets covered just by telephone. Where does the local TV newsman come from? What's his background? How professional is he? Well, at our station, we require generally experience, usually obtained at smaller stations or in smaller markets, and a broad liberal arts education, with emphasis on political science, English, history. But most important, we're looking for bright, energetic people who are willing to work hard and who know how to get along with other people.
Let's look at a simulated news story as it might be presented by two different TV stations. Then, stop the projector and discuss the two versions.
Residents of the Wayne County Jail sued the Board of Commissioners today. 6 prisoners in the county jail have gone to court alleging intolerable conditions in that institution. A select committee of legislators and others visited the jail today. They observed conditions and were given the opportunity to talk with prisoners. A member of the Wayne County Board of Commissioners, Mr. Eugene Sikora, thinks administration of the jail should be given to Gus Harrison, director of the State Department of Corrections.
Well, I think that's where it really belongs. The State Corrections Department really would be the proper body that should administrate all of the jail facilities in the state of Michigan, and certainly Wayne County has the greatest problem.
One attempt to reduce the prisoner population has been the release of certain inmates on a 10% bond. Reliable sources indicate that 35% of those released have not reappeared for their trial. We asked Judge Charles Farmer of Wayne County Circuit Court whether their failure to return was his responsibility if they were released by the order of his court.
Well, I assume that responsibility for letting them out. However, I believe that the traffic court judges know that the responsibility now rests with the police department to bring those people back into court if they do not appear.
Channel 10 News will continue to bring you the latest developments on this and all the other stories related to crime in our community.
Now the same story as reported by another news team.
The Wayne County Jail controversy continues. Some judges have expressed concern over the releasing of selected prisoners on a 10% bail bond. And late today, 6 inmates filed suit against county officials over conditions in the jail. They allege the building is unsafe, unsanitary, and overcrowded, that it does not meet minimal city housing codes, that many do not have mattresses, bedding, or clean clothes. They seek better food, medical care, and an exercise program. These are the people who have not been convicted of any crime. People who are being held in lieu of bonds, people who are awaiting trial. Some have waited over a year for their cases to come up in court. Earlier today, a citizens committee and members of the press toured the jail and spoke with the inmates.
The man had been complaining about people being here sick, having seizures, you know. One brother had a great big knot in the back of his head. He was trying to get to the doctor. The doctor wouldn't see him. So after we raised enough hell, like they coming out the goon squad, take him out, you know, and they used the overlay of wanting sheets and towels like excuse for coming in.
After today's tour, State Senator Coleman Young made this statement.
Well, I'm not easily shocked, but I was shocked at the conditions, at the number of men who've been here for months without having seen a lawyer or a judge, and particularly at the inhuman conditions of the hold, which are without the most basic sanitary facilities, and where a man can go for a week without water or washing facilities, eating and performing all these natural functions.
Another member of the tour, attorney Leonard James, commented that the basic concept in American criminal law is the assumption that even though a man is charged with a crime, he is innocent until proven guilty. Says James, the system denies these inmates a speedy trial and punishes them in this facility. Meanwhile, Sheriff William Lucas notes a new jail would cost upwards of $40 million. The Wayne County Board of Commissioners continues to wrestle with this problem.
Each news report would leave the viewer with a different understanding. Why? In what ways did the two presentations differ? Now, stop the projector.
Stop the projector.
In analyzing these stories, note that everything reported in the first version was true, but it was an example of distortion by omission. Important information was not included. We were told inmates had sued the county, but the conditions they complained about were neither shown nor described. Instead, the newscast concentrated on visitors and officials. However, the second version included film of the inmates, conditions in the jail, the actual words of someone behind bars, and it added the vital information that these persons were not prisoners, had not been convicted of any crime, but were being detained, held for trial.
I am a great believer in news on TV.
What you see on the television and what you read on newspaper are not the real pictures.
So I can't believe that you can really hear one broadcaster read one paper and be satisfied.
Knowing what's involved in the preparation of television newscasts will help you judge the content. We need to use many sources of information, checking and comparing one against the other. Each medium makes its own unique and important contribution. Yet, since each has its own limitations, all must be questioned.
The people in the cars, they didn't do anything wrong. It's the pigs that were after. We don't want no trouble with the cars out there. Hey, man, I wasn't going nothing out there. Why don't you try to stop the people? What do you think I've been saying, man? You're sorry, well, let's stop them, right?
Issues that were brought up about how things are not different today, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing I like about this is it takes a snapshot of contemporary news of the time, which was like 71, 72, and really beginning to think about the media criticism related to how the media works, which I don't know if they teach that now. I really feel like that should be taught, like media criticism, advertising criticism, you know, because kids are pelted. We're all pelted with advertising. And so I feel like it's something that should be talked about. All right. Let's go to Kyoto with Larry. Enjoy.
See, this all happened when I visited Kyoto, Japan. I took a bus tour of the city. Well, that's what I started out to do anyway. visiting Kyoto is kind of like going back into history. Even 1,000 years ago, you would have seen beggars, just like the one near the temple. I spent some money to have my fortune told. It was 50 yen, about 15 cents in American money. I know how to use Japanese money because my dad showed me. He comes to Japan a lot on business, and this time he brought me with him. It was summer vacation, so why not? Anyhow, there was this trained bird. It went into the little house and brought me my fortune. The fortune was in Japanese, so I couldn't read it. But I figured I could ask one of my dad's friends to translate it for me later. Kyoto was the capital of Japan for about 1,000 years, and there are a lot of temples all over the city. If you feel like it, you can even ring the temple bells. It's okay to do it, really. A lot of Japanese people take the bus tour because they like to visit places that are part of their country's history. The bus. You guessed it. I missed it. There wasn't much use going back to the hotel. I just have to sit by myself. My dad was at a meeting all day. So I decided to see the city by myself. I had a map with a lot of important places marked, and some of my dad's friends had told me about some interesting things to see. So I jumped on a streetcar and headed for a place just outside Kyoto. It's a town called Nara. Some buildings in Nara are even older than the ones in Kyoto. This one is called a pagoda, and it's part of a very famous temple. Around the pagoda, there's a park with a lot of deer roaming around. Some kids are afraid of them, but they're really tame and friendly. There was this woman selling rice crackers she could feed to the deer. Japanese call this the Kasuga Shrine. It's used by people who belong to the Shinto religion. They built the Kasuga Shrine about 1,200 years ago when Nara was the capital of Japan, before they moved it to Kyoto. Of course, today, the capital is Tokyo. You can watch the Shinto priests doing their ceremonies just about the way they did them 1,000 years ago. The priest does some of the ceremonies by himself, but there are special nights when they light all the lanterns and hundreds of people come. Back in Kyoto, I found the temple Kinkakuji. My map showed me a big garden nearby. My dad says the Japanese consider gardening a form of art. This garden has a famous building called the Gold Pavilion. "600 years ago, it was the mountain home of a Japanese general. The outside is actually covered with gold. The general who lived here put up this statue of Buddha because he followed the Buddhist religion. The Japanese also have rock gardens. Between the rocks, there's sand, and it can be raked into different patterns. Most Buddhist temples have rock gardens. This is probably the most famous one at the Ryoanji Temple. By now it was past lunchtime, so I bought some fruit. I ate and looked around some more. That's when I found this Japanese cemetery. Some of the graves had plates of food on them. People put them there for the spirits of their dead ancestors. Of course, Kyoto isn't all cemeteries and temples. There's a lot of other things, too. By now I was getting hungry again, so I decided to get some ice cream. Since I couldn't speak the language, I had to point out what I wanted. They had this big glass case with samples. Well, they were really just models of the ice cream they had to sell. After I bought the ice cream, I didn't have enough money left for the streetcar, so I had to walk back to the hotel. But it wasn't far. I was kind of glad I missed that tour bus. I had more fun exploring Kyoto by myself anyway.
I forgot how that one ended. So I'm basically loading up another film over here. So basically what we do is I log this in the database and then I thread it up, and let's see if you can see. So I'm threading it. Let's see if I bring this over without making people barf. So here's the sound head, And traditionally the sound head in a projector actually is here. So there's a delay that's imposed. Then here is the camera. And then here is the gate. I don't want to pull too hard because I'll unplug this webcam. So it's right here, and then it goes around, and then it gets taken up. So you have you have two motors that do all that work. So let me thread this up really quickly. Actually, I need to some dust in the gate, light source, pop that out. So pretty much every film telecine or scanner has this ability. And so those terms, telecine, oftentimes telecine was a way to transfer film in real time to a video signal. So a telecine would output a video signal that then would be recorded at the time to some sort of videotape, whether that was 1-inch, U-matic, Beta SP, DV, whatever. And it was usually an SD signal, but then they got to where they were doing HD signals, and then you were saving to HD cam or some other format. These scanners, what they do is actually they're saving directly to a file, or in this case, it's saving to individual. Each frame gets its own file, and then it's exported as some sort of file. And this is basically a 2K for 16 and 4K for 35. So, anyways, yeah, we geeked out a little bit. That's what we do here. And what I have said in the past is that there's also, besides it saving to a computer, which is over here, there's also an HDMI out for preview, and I'm just pumping that directly into another computer. So I'm saving like a high-res 2K file here, and I'm exporting a HD-ish video file here to this computer that you can't see, and then I'm piping hot to you, fresh video signal. So the HDMI thing that's popping out of this is not the best. It's kind of it's for preview purposes, so it's not really as crisp as I would want it to be, but the ability to do both at the same time means that you guys get an okay image. It's okay for YouTube streaming, and then we get a high quality 2K file that we can work with later and then maybe post separately. Okay, so what we were doing. All right, this one is, what is it? Exploring the nervous system. And I think it's exploring the human nervous system. So that's what we're going to call it. I don't know. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully there won't be any tortured rats today. But yeah, enjoy.
I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself, I seem to have been only a boy being on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me.
The human nervous system, mysterious and complex, waiting to be explored and understood. We have discovered a few smooth pebbles, but the search has really just begun. Biologists have done detailed studies of the nervous systems of some of the invertebrates. The sea anemone, the hydra. We understand in some detail how this simple animal functions. It receives a stimulus which may mean danger. It reacts by withdrawing. The mechanism that produces this action is relatively uncomplicated. The hydra has a simple food cavity enclosed by a body wall only 2 cells in thickness. Between the 2 layers is a network of nerve cells without a spinal cord or brain controlling behavior. Instead, when a sensory cell is stimulated, it triggers impulses which spread in all directions. The whole animal contracts. The simple nerve organization of the hydra, with only a few thousand cells, would be totally inadequate, however, to control more specialized animals with millions of cells. The earthworm, for instance, has a digestive system, a closed circulatory system with blood vessels, and an elaborate muscular system. Being more complicated, the earthworm needs a more complicated nervous system with a rudimentary brain and a central nerve cord with its chain of ganglia. There is 1 ganglion to each segment. Each ganglion gives off several nerves. The nerve fibers are differentiated into afferent, which carry impulses to the nerve cord and ganglion, and efferent, which carry the messages to the muscles and organs. But how vastly more complex is this organism? A person can remember what he learned years before about tide pool life. He can watch a crab, learn how it protects itself, wonder how its armored shell evolved over how many millions of years. He can also get too curious. A boy's reflex withdrawal is far more complicated than a hydra's, but still an action that we have explored in detail. Pressure stimulates receptors in the skin. These receptors are the end organs of specialized nerve cells or neurons. Actually, a great many receptors would be stimulated, but for simplicity, only 1 is shown firing here. The nerve impulses travel along the afferent nerve fiber to the spinal cord. We can't even call this pain as yet, because pain is an idea that is formulated later in the brain. In the spinal cord, the nerve fiber branches, making connection with an intricate complex of other neurons. Contact with the next neuron is made at a synapse. The axon of the first neuron makes contact with dendrites or with the body of the second one. The impulse sets up a physico-chemical reaction that causes the second neuron to fire. A whole complex of secondary neurons relays the impulses to the motor neurons. The long fibers of these motor neurons finally deliver the impulses to the muscles. To move the 20 or so muscles needed to jerk the finger away from the offending crab, at least 4 or 5 spinal nerve trunks are involved. Simple? Perhaps. At least it's called a simple reflex arc. Actually, it's not even that simple. Consider, for instance, the action of a single motor neuron. Aside from the pathway carrying the original impulse, a dozen other pathways may converge on it, each possibly influencing its action. For instance, a fiber from a different part of the cord may slow the firing of the motor neuron. It may stop the firing altogether. Another may speed up the firing. From one part of the brain may come impulses triggered by the organs of vision, or hearing, or equilibrium. From the higher brain centers may come an order stopping the cowardly retreat, but probably not. No, the simple reflex arc is not terribly simple. But let's get on to a more complicated part of our story. At the time the finger is first nipped, impulses travel up the spinal cord to an inner part of the brain, the thalamus. Here, our friend probably experiences his first awareness of pain. In the medulla, other circuits are activated. Signals flash to centers in the brainstem and to wide areas of the cerebral cortex. The brain is alerted to the emergency. The pain impulse, meanwhile, has been relayed to a sensory area of the cortex which localizes the pain in the finger. The eye registers the image of claws, and impulses are sent to the visual area of the cortex. Stored someplace in many cells of the brain is the information that claws are threatening. Some mechanism allows our boy to recall this important item, which he seems to have forgotten. Impulses travel through association pathways and, combined with the sensation of pain, arouse fear. Impulses travel back to lower centers where the autonomic nervous system is activated. Autonomic nerve impulses cause the heart to beat faster, blood vessels to constrict, glands to secrete, and other changes. Impulses travel to the frontal area of the cortex, where perhaps the judgment is made that this is not a fatal wound. Still other countless pathways are activated. All this in a fraction of a second from one nip of a crab. Of the 10 billion or so neurons in our brains, perhaps 3 billion fire every second, even though there is no crisis. If this incredible complexity seems awesome, remember that knowledge is acquired bit by bit. Of all the elusive mysteries of the brain, memory is perhaps the most fascinating. But what is memory? The crab's pinch causes electrical impulses which somehow leave a lasting imprint. We don't know the exact nature of the imprint yet, but we believe it must involve some change in the chemical compounds of cells of the brain, probably some rearrangement of atoms. However, the chemical compounds of our bodies are constantly being renewed. A year from now, the compounds that hold the imprint of the crab's pinch will probably be replaced by others. Why isn't the memory lost? There must be some way for the imprint of memory to be transferred to these new substances. Let's see how investigators go about exploring the mystery of memory. Dr. E.R. John and his associates at the University of Rochester are among those doing basic research on the problem.
Some chemicals seem to serve as blueprints, specifying the way in which other substances will be built. Some of these chemicals can even duplicate themselves. One of these substances, ribonucleic acid, RNA for short, seems perhaps to play a role in memory. We have done an experiment to test that possibility, and for that experiment, we chose to use a small flat worm called the planarian.
There were a number of reasons why Dr. John chose this animal. The planarian has a central nervous system with a rudimentary brain. With this equipment, it is capable of learning. This one is learning a conditioned response. A light is turned on, and a second later, he's given a slight electric shock. During training, the worm shows little reaction to the light, but the shock causes him to contract. This planarian has had 500 training trials. Now, if we flash the light alone without the shock, its reaction is very much like the response to shock. It has learned a simple lesson. It has memory. Some change has taken place, presumably in the brain. Important to this experiment is the fact that when a planarian is cut in two, each half will grow to a complete worm again. Since the head section contains the dominant part of the nervous system, one would expect that a worm which grows from the head section would retain the memory, and so it does. But surprisingly, so does the worm that grows from the tail section. Dr. John's hypothesis was that the RNA in the nerve cells of the tail section is somehow involved in transmitting the memory to the new head. If the RNA in the tail section were destroyed, would that affect the memory? To test this idea, a group of trained planaria were cut in two. However, this time, a chemical that destroys RNA was added to the water. Other trained worms kept in plain pond water were used as controls. After the planaria had regenerated for about 2 weeks, the head ends that had been in the chemical solution were tested. They continued to respond to the light in the same way that they had before being cut in two. However, the regenerated tail ends that had been in the chemical solution reacted as if they had not been trained at all. Evidently, the tail section was unable to transmit the learning to its new head. It is reasonable to think that this was because the RNA was destroyed at the cut surface.
Like most experimental results, other explanations also seem reasonable, and so further work must be done to narrow down the possibilities. Science is a business of converging to the truth. We and many others are working on other studies in this field. Each study provides one small bit of information, enough such bits, and someday we will understand memory.
Another major area of research covers the electrical activity of the nervous system. A principal research tool is the electroencephalograph, or EEG. The EEG records the spontaneous electrical activity of the brain. To the untrained person, normal tracings look like random squiggles at first. But even a quick look reveals two very different kinds of wave patterns. Small, rapid movements called beta waves are usually most prominent toward the front of the head. Larger, slower alpha waves are most prominent at the back of the head. One significant fact is that alpha waves change abruptly when a person is alerted. For instance, if the person just opens his eyes, the alpha waves disappear. Close, and they reappear. Watch again. There has been an upsurge of research into the electrical activity of the nervous system since investigators have learned to implant electrodes deep in the brain. Electrodes can stay in the brain without pain or injury. Among those investigating electrical activity is Dr. Ross Adey of UCLA.
We are interested in the way the brain stores information as a memory trace. To study this phenomenon, we have developed an electrical technique which allows us to measure the resistance of brain tissue. We implant a special double electrode into the brain and with it measure the resistance of small amounts of brain tissue. The monkey that you see here has special miniature plastic sockets on its head which permit the connection of these deep brain probes with external measuring devices.
The double electrode has been implanted in a deep region of the brain which is known to be important in the process of storing information. The tips of the electrode rest in the brain tissue. An electrical current going from one pole to another must pass through the brain tissue, which sets up a certain amount of resistance to the current. Dr. Adey's idea was to find out if any differences in resistance occur in the brain tissue after new information has been stored in it. To conduct this experiment, the monkey had to be given something new to learn. Equipment was constructed on which 3 lighted symbols appear in different combinations. Pressing one of the 2 similar ones makes the lights go off. The monkey has to learn to press the odd one in order to get a pellet of food. The equipment fits on the front of the cage within easy reach.
Sorry about that, folks. I thought we were just doing planaria, but it looks like we went a little crazy. Let's avoid a cold instead.
The guardians of our health, our doctors, nurses, teachers, and parents, are working together to keep us well. All of them must know and agree on the health practices we need at home, in the neighborhood, and at school. This is Joan, getting ready for school. Joan learned at school that it's important to choose the right clothes on a cold day. The temperature is 40, too cold for just a coat. She will need her snowsuit if she wishes to keep well for the Dutch festival. And this is Jim, Joan's brother. They choose wraps to keep all of their body warm. Mother is glad to see Jim looking so well this morning. Their color is good, their eyes alert. They're ready for work or play. Mother needs to get another supply of paper handkerchiefs. Jim's friend George is eating an apple as he waits for them. That is a wise no thank you, Joan. Never share another's food. George has forgotten something that helps keep him clean. It's lucky for George that Joan has an extra tissue to lend him. Some children learn to jump or go around puddles, but George wades right into trouble because he forgot his galoshes.
This is Miss May, Joan's teacher. George and Joan are glad to be in school. The children are getting ready for their Dutch festival. Tom has brought the thermometer in so that the children can guess what the weatherman doll should wear today. A raincoat and umbrella? Oh, no. A snowsuit and galoshes to keep him warm and dry. It was hard to guess today, but Tom is a good guesser. Or did Mother tell him what to wear? George, you forgot something more important than your handkerchief. You forgot to cover your sneeze. And cold germs travel on your sneeze or cough, you know. Why, cold germs can fly farther than Miss May can blow the feather. Cold germs can fly 8 feet to another child's nose, hand, or food. People who put fingers into their mouths make it easy for cold germs to come to them. No, not that way, George. Blow your nose gently, without pressing the opening of the nostrils closed. That's better. Oh, and your feet are wet. It's easy to catch cold when your body is chilly. You'd better go and see the school nurse. She'll help you. The nurse is examining Mary after her cold. 4 days at home with a cold keeps others from catching it and protects you from serious infections that follow colds.
Now, George, who sent you in here?
Miss May said I might be catching a cold.
Well, what do you think?
I'm hot and chilly.
Well, did you sleep pretty well last night, and did you feel like getting up this morning? Did your breakfast taste good?
I hardly had time to have my breakfast. I had an apple on the way.
Now blow your nose, George. Oh, not so hard, gently. No pressure on the opening. Now let's look at your throat. Open wide. All right, now you sit down, and I'll take her. You moisten your lips and hold this under your tongue. Oh, your feet are wet too, George. Winnetka, 3, 2, 1. Hello, is it Mrs. Powell there? Yes. Well, this is Miss Wright, Mrs. Powell. George came in to see me a few moments ago with a cold. Yes, his throat is quite red and his feet are wet, too. I do think he'd be more comfortable at home in bed. Well, just a minute, please. Yes, his temperature is 99.8. Well, it is best to consult your physician if it goes over 100, especially during the cold season. Oh, that would be nice of you to call for him. Yes, he'll be right here in my office. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Joan's mother visits school to plan a health program. Joan must learn to take responsibility for keeping herself well. This weather chart keeps Joan alert to weather changes as she marks snowy or rainy days. Dressing this weather doll for outdoor weather helps Joan know what to wear herself. It will be better for Mother when Joan chooses wraps to suit the temperature instead of arguing about what friends wear. Mother and teacher check Joan's health habits. They plan better health practices for home and school. At school, Joan's committee keeps the washroom attractive with soap sponges, brushes, and signs. Others keep the closets neat with boxes for rubbers and hangers for clothes. Another records the temperature and tells us when we need heat or fresh air. One group keeps large drawing pencils scrubbed ready for use.
Those are jobs Joan and Jim could be learning to do at home, too. On Saturdays, they love to help us plan what we're going to do. I'm so glad to get this health record sheet. Your check on Joan's habits at school will help me plan a corrective health program at home. I'm going to find out what kind of health practices we use, and I must check on our equipment to see if we have the materials to carry on the school practices. Thank you for some grand ideas, Miss May. I'm going to visit school again some afternoon when I call for Joan. May I?
Do come often. It is good for teachers and children to have parents visit school.
Next morning, Joan's mother is inspecting the health materials in her home. Each one in the family needs a separate towel and washcloth. Mother has one for Jim and another for Joan, each with his own name. Joan's father made a box for her to stand on. It's no fun washing if you have to stretch or can't see into the basin. And here are new cups. Each can have his own cup now. It prevents catching another's cold. Why, Jim, why are you so cross? Father has taught Joan to spit into the toilet, for spitting spreads disease. Here are the spoons for your cod liver oil, Joan. It's extra sunshine for us in winter and spring. You know, strong bodies can't always keep us from catching cold, but they help us resist a serious illness that may follow colds. Keep away from persons with colds, and keep your hands clean while you're eating. Jim must wash his hands after he pets his dog, but he won't have to go upstairs, as Father has arranged a washstand downstairs, so Jim will remember to wash. What's the trouble with Jim? He didn't like his breakfast, and he was restless as he slept. He's cross and tired this morning. His throat isn't very red, but his eyes look queer. He'd better stay home today so that Mother can watch him and keep him warm. Joan's mother can't go to the kermis now, so Joan must take the paper bags for the party. Colds are easy to catch during the first 24 hours. Mother must see that Jim covers his coughs and stays away from others. She must sterilize his dishes by boiling them thoroughly in water. Joan's room at school is a busy place, and Joan wants to help get ready for the kermis. But first, she must wash her hands. We must always wash hands clean before handling food. So, Joan takes off her coat, uses plenty of soap and a good lather. She rinses her hands well and dries them thoroughly with a paper towel. In another room, the kindergarten children are getting ready for the kermis. It's best to go to the toilet and wash hands first. Now Joan has her wraps off, her hands are clean, and she's ready to pack the bags for the kermis. The kermis has started. George's friends are selling the flowers they raised. They learn that flowers, like children, need plenty of sunshine, water, good food, and moderate temperature to make them grow. Joan's friends are selling cheese, and they are careful to keep the food clean. Everyone is having a good time, while poor George stays in bed. His careless habits have made Jim miss the kermis too, and Jim is restless in bed. Now he knows it pays to avoid people with colds. But Jim's friends are enjoying the kermis. They learn that Dutch people are clean. Hollanders leave their wooden shoes on their doorstep so that their floors are spotless. The Dutch drink milk and raise their own vegetables and flowers. They keep well. You have seen these children learning to take care of themselves. Now, do you know why George and Jim missed the kermis?
Yeah, I apologize for the shocking footage. I guess I should have been thinking, like, you know what? They're talking a lot about electrical impulses in nerves. So maybe I shouldn't show this at lunch. So hopefully Joan avoiding a cold and watching George's utter failure to avoid a cold helped us kind of get through that. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, we'll be back again tomorrow, Thursday. We'll watch some more films. And, yeah, it's all some new faces or new names on the comments. So thanks for that. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up. If you like the concept of what you saw, hit the thumbs up or the subscribe. You can also donate via the Super Thanks button or go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. Those are ways to support us. You can also watch other films that we have on our YouTube channel. And if you have a short attention span, check us out on TikTok. It is at avgeeks. At av.geeks. If you type in just straight AV Geeks, you'll see a lot of footage about airplanes. because they have tried to co-opt the AV Geeks name. Anyways, everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.